This is MMAnytt speaking to Mike Goldberg, the expert commentator of the UFC.
Nice to see you guys. What's going on?
It's been an honor. Good. Yeah. How are you?
It's been fun. It's been a good week. It's been a good week. It's fun to be over here.
What do you think about this week's event?
You know, I mean, it's just crazy. We were talking about it today that since the time when Michael Bisping won the Ultimate Fighter, just the explosion of mixed martial arts here in the UK and throughout Europe. And not just the explosion as far as the fans, but the quality of fighters. And it goes back to the US versus UK Ultimate Fighter. There's just so many great fighters here in the UK now, so many great personalities, and the fans at the Expo today were off the charts. And so it's always exciting to be here. There's a great energy, there's a great enthusiasm, and there's great fighters on the card tomorrow night.
Honestly, what do you think about the card? Because a lot of people have criticized it. I mean, honestly, Bisping for a main event, a lot of people say that maybe he's a boring fighter or something. What do you think about the card?
Well, honestly, I think he's the perfect guy to have in the main event here in London. I mean, he's London's own. He is the face of mixed martial arts in the UK. You know, Dan Hardy's outstanding, obviously Ross Pearson and John Hathaway, and you know, you can go on down the list of the up-and-comers. Well, Michael Bisping's kind of the pioneer, and so for Michael to have the opportunity to fight in a main event, again, he fought Rashad in a main event years ago, I think is awesome. And to take on Japan's biggest star, I think is awesome as well. And so, you know, they always look at cards on paper. I mean, there's certain cards that look great on paper, and then it's like, eh. And then it's oftentimes I've found that the ones where you go, I don't know if I'm that excited, those are the ones that end up great because the fighters leave it all out there. These fighters are all trying to make a name for themselves. These fighters are all trying to, you know, get up to the next level. Dan Hardy's trying to prove that there's a lot of fight left in him after he was beaten by GSP. So, you know, don't always judge a card. That's the way I look at it. Don't always judge a card until we actually see the fights.
You might be right. But is there any particular fight that you're
Condit Hardy for sure. Carlos Condit and Dan Hardy in a lot of ways are the same person. And they're violent, they're aggressive, and they bring the fight. And so I think when you look at that clash, you saw it at the weigh-ins today, it's a great fight. And it's the one that excites me the most because Carlos Condit was, you know, pretty much beat up by Rory McDonald for a couple of rounds. Then you saw what Carlos is all about, the way he came back in that fight. And again, Dan's gone back to the drawing board and rebuilt himself. And I'm a Dan Hardy fan anyway. I like when Dan fights. He's exciting. He's fun in the press conferences. He's got a lot of personality. So that fight to me is two aggressive dudes who really want to be in the upper echelon. For Dan again, and for Carlos for the first time in the UFC's welterweight division.
Are you allowed to pick any winners? And if
you know what? I'm allowed. I'm allowed, but I usually don't.
You don't.
You know, because like Joe always says, the one thing you don't want to have is a professional fighter mad at you. So I don't want to say, oh yeah, Dan Hardy's going to win. Carlos Condit says, I thought we were boys, man. How come you said I was going to get? So I've always been careful about that. But I really do believe that there are going to be some great fights. John Hathaway is, you know, for Mike Pyle. I'm really happy for Mike Pyle. Mike Pyle's a guy who was in the background and fighting in smaller shows for a long time. One of the most respected teammates and coaches at Extreme Couture. Now he's gotten his chance. Now he's on the billboards. Now he's on the magazines. And he's, you know, he's on the pay-per-view against a big-name British opponent here in England. I'm really excited for Mike Pyle in the opportunity that he has for himself more so than anything else. Because again, he's always been the great teammate. I'm glad Mike's finally getting to fight for himself.
So if we don't talk about just this event, is there any fighter you all must have special fighters that your favorite fighter? Who would that be?
My favorite fighter's always been Randy Couture. I mean, my first UFC was back in 1997, and really one of the first guys I met was Randy. You know, I was with Jeff Blatnick, a wrestler back then, as my partner. Big John McCarthy's always been close to Randy, and so Randy Couture has really always been my favorite fighter. I have a lot of great friends in this business. Marcus Davis is one of my best buddies, and you know, and honestly, there's so many great people in this sport that I really can't name 3 fighters that I don't like. You know, everybody's been great. We travel together, as you can see. We have great relationships. But if I had to pick one, especially going back as far as I do, it would have to be Randy.
About the matchup between Vitor versus Anderson Silva. For the first time, I think we're going to see a guy that I think can match him standing. Has great boxing.
Yep.
They both have, but I think that he's never faced a boxer like that. such a great stand-up fighter.
There's no question.
Vitor.
I'm a big Vitor fan. I've always been a big Vitor fan. We talked about it today at the Fan Expo, Joe and I, that I still remember when he just annihilated Vanderlei Silva back in Sao Paulo, Brazil years ago, and it was unbelievable. Vitor is the phenom, and his hands are as good as any in the sport, maybe better than any in the sport. If Vitor shows up, if he's healthy and he brings it, I think stylistically it's a tough matchup for Anderson, because Vitor is also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So he's also got great grappling and great ground skills, great submissions. And hand speed, somebody might actually, reach is going to go to Anderson, but speed itself, probably, maybe even power is going to go to Vitor, and I love that matchup. I was really bummed out when Vitor got hurt and the fight wasn't in Abu Dhabi. We've waited, and knock on wood, everybody stays healthy, and it'll finally be here.
I was in Abu Dhabi for that fight.
Yeah,
also.
And it was to me, like I said, I've always been a big Vitor fan. Anderson is as great as any fighter in UFC history. Obviously, nobody beats him. But if somebody's going to, we thought it was Chael Sonnen for 4.5 rounds.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be Vitor Belfort.
We're here from Sweden. We're a Swedish news magazine, and do you know anything about the Swedish fighter Alexander Gustafsson that you would like to share with us?
It's just that
he's fighting tomorrow.
He's a gamer. He's obviously got great skills, and I think with Alexander, the big thing, as you guys know, being from Sweden, is finding great training partners. The sport is still young in a lot of countries, and they always talk about how iron sharpens iron, steel sharpens steel, and so for Alexander, it's just continuing to branch off. But we've seen him in there with Price, right? He's, I think he brings a great set of skills. He's obviously in great condition. It'll be a great matchup, and for me, I think it's huge for guys from other countries. The Czech Congo, obviously, now Cyril Diabate. Obviously Alexander. We've seen the Dennis Seaver come through Germany. To me, it's great to come over here, then have the local guys on the card. Tom Egan obviously fought John Hathaway when we were in Dublin. That excites me, and when we finally make our way to Sweden, perhaps Alexander Gustafsson will be in the main event.
We hope so. So if you have to pick a winner, he's facing Cyril tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a tough fight. It's a tough fight. And the thing about Cyril is obviously that we saw his level of striking against Louis Kane. And for a second there, he got rocked. It looked like he was trying to adjust himself. I'm sure that Alexander probably doesn't want to get in a slugfest with him. I mean, they both have good stand-up, but Cyril's a world champion, obviously. So it's all about game plan. It's all about taking the fight to where you'll have the advantage. I mean, if he stands with him, knocks him out, good for him. But, we saw what Cyril did to Louis Kane, and Louis Kane came in with, high praise at that point. It'll be interesting to see that fight. It's a fight I like, though, because both guys will bring it. And like I said, I'm a big Muay Thai fan, and watching Cyril, kind of cut through and cut up Louis Kane was a thing of beauty.
I think so too. Mike, very thanks.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I've always been wanting to talk to you, ask you a couple of questions.
It's great that you guys support the sport, and hopefully we'll be in your backyard too.
I hope so too.
Big
hope
Peter
so
Forsberg fan, so love my hockey.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you, guys.